Well, good evening to everyone. I appreciate you being with us today for our first meeting of the month of March for our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Board Committee. I'd like for us to start off with a welcome from our committee chairperson, Ms. Stephanie Walker.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Thank you to everyone for being here again and again, for coming back and working on these tough issues that I think that when you put some time in, we're going to really do some good work here. I hope everybody had a relaxing weekend. I know I did. I'm a spring girl, so I was happy to get outside and finally do something. Although I feel I need to get some more strength going because it was very tiring. But anyway, I welcome everybody here, and I'm ready for a really good discussion. Looking at our agenda, it looks like we are probably going to just, first of all, let's take the time to anybody that has any announcements or anything they want to share. I would love to hear it. I know the group would too. I will turn it over to anybody that wants to speak up or has anything to say or announce or anything that they want to share.
Well, I visited 4 schools this morning and was excited
Well done.
about each one of them. They went to Riceville Beach, College Park, where my wife worked, so they were glad to see me and retired from. And then actually went to Isaac Baird and went to New Hanover High School.
Awesome.
And I would say most of the classes after elementary schools, there weren't maybe 5 kids in a class. Most kids are not coming. Of course, they say ABB, but I mean, it was really small.
Yeah.
This is real small classes. But the elementary schools, they didn't say anything bad to me, and I thought they were pretty excited about going back to school. Of course, it's been really nice with and Stephanie and I were talking earlier about the pandemic percentile has really, really come down, and the shots are available. So hopefully everything's going to work well. I'm excited about the kids going back there. I think they need to be in school.
Great, thank you.
Hopefully that'll give them an introductory into summer school. We can really start to try to recapture as much as possible.
Yeah. Anybody else have anything they want to add? Okay, well, if not, then we will go on to the next item on agenda, which is we're going to talk about suspension rates. I didn't have anything prepared, but I've been studying this a lot. This happens to be a topic that's very much in the community forefront. The NAACP Parent Council has a petition that wants to basically eliminate suspensions in K through 5. I know Dr. Faust got to meet with a group on Friday to talk about it, and I think they maybe came to an understanding about a timeline. I think Dr. Faust is looking at it over the next couple of years. I know I would like to have it as part of it, amongst other things, but when I talked to him today, he understood that there are a lot of stakeholders that we need to bring into the conversation. The last discussion we had last week about my particular strategy about drastically reducing rates showed me that there are people's perspectives we need to really listen to, and especially in light of we can't eliminate all suspensions, of course, but if we can work towards reducing the rates, especially with our students of color, our male students of color, and students that have IEPs, that will really work really hard. Tyler says something about vaccinations. I don't know. Anyway, so I don't know, Dr. Smith, there's anything particular we wanted to talk about with suspension rates that you have to add? Is Dr. Smith there, or did she get cut off too? Tech has not been my friend today.
Sorry, I'm here. I was just muted.
Oh, sorry. I was like, where is she?
No, I'm here. I was just struggling to find my mute button. Sometimes it gets on the screen. So if you recall from our last meeting, we shared just the discipline data, specific to the suspension data from just this year.
Right.
And then we really, I think, ran out of time to have a really in-depth conversation. And so we ended our meeting with the understanding that we would bring that back to the top of our agenda and give space and place to have that conversation. So I can definitely share that data again, but just wanted to allow those conversations that were not able to develop and evolve from our last meeting to have that opportunity now.
So I know you brought up the data from this past year, and I think it focusing on out of school suspensions mainly. And I think if I recall, the data was from all the grades. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Well, I can bring it up very easily.
I appreciate that.
Not a problem. Okay, we're hearing that we have an online, there's an echo.
Oh, don't think is it me that's echoing?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I
Oh.
read it completely wrong. An echo. Thank you. No, I'm sorry. All right, that's why you have to read the comment from beginning to end and not assume the content. So let me stop sharing and I'll find that database.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to add that the board has actually got some feedback regarding this. It is coinciding with a policy. We are updating our policy manual that has needed to be updated for over a decade. And I think because it's become a public discussion more so because of that process with the policy update. So it is important, I think, because it's one of the goals that we have and strategies we have here with the EDI committee is to really look at the suspension rates. So it's important, like Dr. Smith says, to look at the data. That's going to tell us a lot. It's going to make us want to ask more questions, and that'll kind of push the discussion going forward. But go ahead, Dr. Smith. If you want to look at we can look at the data again.
So hopefully you can see the information that's on the screen that says 2020. 2021
yes.
OSS data. And let me pause just a second. We've got some folks in the space with us. And just want to check with them to make sure that they can hear. Are you guys able to hear what's happening? Okay, if you want to, you can either get a little bit closer, 6 foot of social distancing, of course. Or if you have the ability to listen remotely, you got earbuds or something like that, then you could. I know you can hear us, but it's just your ability to hear them here. And I'll turn my computer up as loud as I can.
I really just want to speak with you whenever we're done.
Okay. All right. So thank you. We don't typically have folks in our space, but we welcome them and we want to make sure that they can hear and can participate. So we want to make sure that is available to them.
All right.
All right. All right, so on the screen, you see the data that we shared from our last meeting. And so I'll just kind of flip through those slides again, and then we can begin our discussion.
Okay.
Hey, Dr. Smith. Sorry. Did you say we're going to do our discussion after this? I apologize.
Yeah, I just wanted to refresh folks' memories with the data. But
okay.
Tyler, I would say that if you want to jump in at any point, you surely can.
Okay. Could we go back? I think it was 2 slides to the one that was yes, that one. So I apologize. The yellow and gray one that breaks it down by offense. Yes, that one. So this I believe would probably be something that a lot of teachers would echo, that this is where the breakdown happens. So there's some things like fighting that may be a little more objective, although I would debate that, and perhaps possession of controlled substance. But things like inappropriate behavior, aggressive behavior, disruptive behavior, et cetera, I feel like all of those are so subjective, and that's where that implicit bias comes in. That's where that training needs to continue. And, within rewriting policy, looking at what is clearly defined as, aggressive behavior or inappropriate behavior, because it changes depending on the principal. It changes depending on the principal's day and the teacher. The teacher is sitting here and And, for those not familiar with our discipline system, when you go in to put in an offense, if you don't put it in correctly, you can put it in as what's called a UB, which is undesirable behavior, or you can put it into RO, which is a reportable offense. And if you're not careful with that, that's the A behavior management system. I think when we look at rewriting policies, we've got to be very specific about what are quote unquote suspendable offenses. Because I've seen it with my colleagues. I mean, I've even felt it myself, those students that I have a really hard time, breaking through with and trying to build that relationship with. Depending on the day or depending on the situation, you get frustrated and, you send them, you may send them, to the office or what have you. And then, you may look back later and say, man, I just did not handle that situation the best I could have. And so I think really, look at rewriting policy to be very clear and precise about what are suspendable offenses. That's just my 2 cents for right now. I'm really passionate about this topic. So.
Well, and thank you, Tyler. At one point, you're a little hard to hear, but I think we kind of got the
I'm
gist.
finished. I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear.
No. I think we really got the gist of what you're saying.
Who puts the offense list together?
Okay. I apologize. Being on the road is hard.
Yeah,
that's okay. What do you say, Hugh? Who puts the defense list together?
Who puts this
together?
What that? This particular page?
So this data is collected by our student support services, and it is exported from our discipline management system.
Does the discipline management system allow a little more specificity, for lack of a better word? I mean, what is the insubordination? I get the cutting class. I get the tobacco. I mean, as far as identifying exactly what it was, inappropriate items, disrespect. What did they say or what did they do? I mean, that might help us in our training and our focus of what the specificity is, because all it says is aggressive behavior. And I think earlier, as it was talking about, different people with different things, but a little more specific about what actually was said or done or brought to school.
So these represent classifications of behaviors. So if the question is there the opportunity to provide a description of the exact behavior, this very specific behavior, then yes, there is.
Okay, but I think if we could get that might help us understand whatever it is that we need to focus or, put together when all this is said and done, maybe a little better understanding of what exactly took place. And then from there, we have a starting point.
But you know that one of the things that we notice when reading this data, when we have the data black and white, it's just numbers, groups, and amounts that go towards a school. And sometimes who has the time in all honesty to go, oh, let me see, and I'm gonna go with my school, for example. We can have 2 or 3 referrals, and the first thing is we don't know if they are elementary or middle school, because we are the only one that has the 2 sides in one, and we are counting just as Gregory. The second thing is, if we we see the number as a whole in a meeting like this, and we don't have the second part to really dissect and see, oh, insubordination, the child refused to do the work for 3 times in a row, or for 3 days in a row. The child refused to close the computer on the thing that he was doing and doing what the teacher was telling them. So those things are sometimes the ones that come to because they are so repetitive, that get to the point that the teacher just, that gets tired of the same thing over and over, and then refer them, and then becomes an in-school suspension or a school suspension, whatever, but it's not in the big scope of offenses, but refusing to do the work, or, walking in the classroom when he was not supposed to walk. And I'm not saying that we are suspending for that, but sometimes it gets to the point that the offenses are like that. and it's pretty much on the view of the observer right there. And it's hard. I mean, from the outside, I can say, come on, are you suspending a child just because he's walking in the classroom? But then it's a constant disruption in the setting that gets all these teacher tired, and then until to the point that they decide to refer. So it's so hard to try to establish that and to measure that.
So there's some questions that have kind of popped up in the chat. One in regards to, is there a breakdown of offenses by grade level cohort? So the data that's in front of us is just the data for this year. And of course, it looks very different than it would in a typical year because of the fact that our students were not in attendance and face-to-face in school full time. Do all educators and staff have access to de-escalation training? We do make that available. And Lena, I'm sure you being in a school site probably could speak very specifically to that. I don't know if you've gone through we actually do de-escalation and restraint training, but it is available to our staff.
Is it required or is it just optional?
It is required. I don't know if it's required of all staff, but it is required. Every school has to have a team of folks that are trained.
The ones that are trained for restraining, yes, it's required. But I think the de-escalation, we had it once because there were a lot of, a lot of events and situations that needed, and the principal made the process and took care of that, providing us with the training. People from the county came and gave us an excellent training on 2 sessions, but it was the first time we had it in the 3 years that I've been in the school. So I don't know if it's mandated every year or how that works.
Can I make a point too, Dr. Smith? We're looking at out-of-school suspensions here, which obviously is different than in school. That goes without saying, but a lot of these things that we're looking at, to Tyler's point, like, are they necessarily offenses that kids should be taken out of school for? Because essentially they're missing class, which is a big problem too. I've seen some statistics about that, amount of days that kids are out because of out of school suspensions. So, I mean, it's definitely good to look at the data, have it in context, and, ask the questions of like, what is these offenses? Are they necessarily something you should put a child out of school for? So anybody have anything to add to that point, like being out of school for, cutting class? It kind of seems like that goes against, I mean, cutting class means they're out of school anyway, but.
And the thing is that from the point that I think when the principal has to make the decision of a child that comes over and over for the same thing, even if it is, a petty offense, and we don't have alternative solutions, we don't have a project or something that the child, or even a place to have the child doing some recovery work or some kind, the restorative justice part, we don't have a system for that. We don't have a person that we can pull out of the room helping that child with, something that is going to be natural consequence of the offense. So for lack of alternatives, that ends up being a suspension then.
Right. That speaks a little bit to policy too, because I know we are updating policy 4300, which talks about student discipline. And I think the policy committee has added a line in about restorative justice. And I think that's a good start. But I think you're right that, there's nothing in policy necessarily that addresses multiple issues. I think adding the flexibility is a good thing, but without the training, I'm not sure people, even if you don't have it written in the pages of a policy, right now it's pretty broad. Like restorative justice practice, like if you've never been trained on it, you're not really sure what that means. It might not apply or work for someone that's trying to find alternative methods of behavior maintenance or management. Sorry.
And there is a lot of financial implications of that. It's not just I wanted to do it, it's how I'm going to staff the personnel to do it in the good way, because that takes time and human power to be created, how to have natural consequences for the different offenses. That is a full-time job right there.
And I'm
right.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
I speak on restorative practices, and it is work, and it does take time, but it is worth it. Even as a who probably did not believe in restorative practice or implement restorative practice. It is about taking a soft approach to something that you really write a referral for in the immediate. And so this is a process that we have been going through for the last 3 years at Virgo. And it is our 3rd year. And of course, we have COVID. We still do our morning meetings. We still do certain practices. And it's not that anything is foolproof, but it is something different and it allows you to think differently. So even system-wide, whether we are talking about at elementary levels or high school levels, I think in Edgecombe County, where it is a charter school, but they have even started, that's where we started looking at some of the models that they had. One of the ladies, I want to say her name was April, and she presented at New Hampshire County from the Friday Institute during one of the summer sessions, or one of the sessions that happened for innovative practices. And so that is the biggest thing. It has to be a new approach to what you think discipline is and how you think, even if we've been in education for a long, long time. And when you start having conversations and when you start building those relationships, it makes a difference.
Ms. Sidbury, you've been using it for a couple of years now?
Yeah,
do you feel like it's made a difference?
I want to say we went full. We started we started talking about it so what's this, our 3rd year? We started talking about it the beginning or the end of year 1. Then we started implementing it last year. But believe it or not, I feel like COVID, because it's embedded in our schedule daily, made us go through the approach every day. And it's just morning meeting. And then we have like a restorative committee where they look at referrals, and students sometimes take a approach to their consequences and just different things like that. So this is our 3rd year. Well, but yeah, COVID is really our first full implementation year where everyone is on board, and it's expected across the board for everyone to do it and to look at those practices. And so year 4 will be better. So
do you feel it's been successful?
I feel like it makes you better as an educator. And so, I mean, success is a student that may be, because we don't have a isolation room, and we don't have, so students that may be isolated or in an IBS room or anything, we don't have that. We don't have an IBS room. So either you're gonna go home or you're gonna stay in school. And so students that would never be in a general education classroom or have never been in a general education classroom, you have to have different approaches if you truly are an educator, because you want all your students to be there. And so that's just something you can't think of it as being a quick fix. It's going to be a 5-year turnaround. You have to, it's step by step.
Thank you for that. That's really important. And I feel like there are people in our county that are doing programs like this or implementing. And I think I listened to the Latino Alliance earlier, and they were talking about I'm trying to get my notes here. They were talking about the strong, hold on. I've got my notes. It was a strong initiative, which was a trauma-informed training program. And I know the New Hampshire County Resiliency Task Force has been doing some work with schools. And I just think that if we can somehow just broaden the discussion, because first we're going to talk about data. First, we're going to look at that and try and pull it apart to see maybe where we can do better. And, if we're implementing, and I think that if we pass the policy that obviously includes the restorative justice component in it, it'll give us more options, but it also expand the conversation. And when we talk about it, we can maybe see what you're doing that's working. And, if you're already doing the work, I'm sure it will help everybody else try and do the work. Because right now the push is looking at elementary schools. I know the Parent Council has that petition out there. I think they really do believe in looking at like the whole child and looking at ways to reduce suspension rates in the younger years, which will probably help later on. But DC Virgo obviously is different. It's a higher level grade, but discussion is coming up. It's a big community topic. I know the League of Women Voters has kind of backed the initiative too, but like we need to, Dr. Faust, I spoke today and we were talking about how we can make it a longer year plan, because it's going to take time to implement and get people in the mindset of doing that instead of going straight for suspensions. Anybody have anything to add to that conversation?
I have something to add in a request. So
Okay.
I think, so I'll preface it by saying this. We know this is not a new problem. This is not a problem that's exclusive to New Hanover County. So we know that this is a systemic problem. Groundwater vocab, and Dr. Smith brings this up a lot, and I love it. The fish is not the problem. The water is the problem, right? So we've got to figure out how to start addressing that. I think we've got to start with clear data first. So Dr. Smith, do you think maybe by next meeting, do you think we could pull up discipline data from 3 years ago, pre-COVID, pre-Florence that year, which would have been, what is that? Would that have been 18-19?
So short answer to that is yes. We're actually working on that request right now.
Okay.
Hopefully, and should have it by, I would say, no later than maybe tomorrow, day after tomorrow. But we are actually working on that. That was a data request that came to us. So yes.
Okay, great. Because I think once we look at the full scope of a year, we really get a clear picture of, what does it look like for a normal, non-pandemic, non-hurricane, non-natural disaster year. And I think that'll give us a better jumping point. And the other question I had is, do all New Hanover County schools use the ABE referral system?
So we actually use a different system now, starting this year, but all schools are using that system.
Okay.
With ABE, all schools weren't using the ABE system.
Okay, that shows you how long it's been. Okay, good.
All right. So there are a couple more questions in the chat, and a couple of them, I think, Rachel, you answered. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Well, I think, Kamiko, you probably answered your own question in terms of de-escalation training, leading to lower numbers of referral, just in terms of that conversation about restorative practices. Okay.
So Dr. Smith, I guess if we're waiting on the data, I think we can talk more about it, I guess, the next meeting if you want to, when we get more data, and then we can broaden the discussion out.
Okay.
Do you want to talk more about, anybody want to talk about suspension data now, or we can put that on, we can go to the next agenda item if you want.
I just have a quick question. So these numbers are from this past year, and then we know that, I think Rachel answered it in the chat, that the only people allowed to, with the power for suspending, are our administrators. So knowing that our administrators have been doing dedicated trainings on implicit bias and trainings with James Ford and Dr. Eakins, I just want to know, do we really feel that we are seeing that these trainings are having an impact on the actions of our administrators if we are still seeing these numbers of suspensions from our schools when we've had such low populations due to COVID? Does that question make sense?
I think it does.
I think it would be interesting to look site by site at that. But when I look at this data, I, as an administrator, see how low the numbers are and think, wow, if we were going to have a goal to decrease the number of suspensions in a school year, we met that goal, I would guess, not having seen all the last numbers. But the slide that concerns me more, and I'm not sure which number it is, Dr. Smith, but when it's broken down by race.
I think that's the next one. I'll go on to that one. Well, there we go.
So even though our suspensions, I would guess, and I'm not at sites that have really high suspension rates, but I would guess they are way, way down, way, way down. You still have a significant issue. And this comes back to equity. So I think Carissa's question is very fair. And it, even though we're barely having suspensions as compared to years past, you still see this problem. Yeah. And then what? How do we address this? What is it? What are we needing to address? And I think there was another slide in here that had EC.
I think that's the next one.
And so I would be curious.
This is
how many of those kids have an IEP and it's related to behavior, intensive behavior supports, and how many of those students would also fall under one of the very overrepresented category of race. And my guess is that it would be a tremendous area to focus and try to start from. But that would be my administrator hat. And
I agree. It's a very good observation because I was feeling the same way. I didn't know the Dr. was going to show us the data from this year, which we know the rates are lower because people aren't in school or kids aren't in school, but it's still disproportionately high in the categories that it was before COVID. And I think that's really what we got to look at. We got to figure out like all these things that we're talking about that are really valid concerns, you know, the restorative justice practice trainings and all. It really, that's why we were looking at the initial data. This is like the above the high up data, but getting down below and just digging into why. What Chris said was, you know, if the administrators are doing the out of school suspensions and they've had training, I guess that's a measure too, right? We were talking about how we can measure things when we have a before and we have an after, and perhaps that's some numbers we can dig into. And I don't know what that's going to look like yet, whether it could be a questionnaire or it could be, I don't know. All these ideas are great though, because they lead to other questions that we can answer and hopefully get people to speak to for us. I attended a CREED workshop a few years ago with Dr. Ford. He had a lot of this data, and his point was that, you know, the suspension rates are disproportionate for our African American students, male and specifically male, and also the EC kids, or the IEPs, or the kids that are, you know, probably may need more services. If suspensions are being resorted to, perhaps maybe there are other things we can do. So that's a very good observation.
Okay, and Sean has her hand raised.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what Rachel was saying is, you know, if you want to make a big swing, there is a huge bucket that we can kind of concentrate and maybe focus on that may be a lot of the same people, just because of some of the overrepresentation of children of color into special education in general. And I think I touched on this last week, but I would be really interested in seeing out of those kids with an IEP, how many have a behavior improvement plan and have gotten an FBA, because like that should be the first screen, right? That should be the first path. If you're having issues and a kid with a disability is having an issue, like let's give some tools for both the teachers and the child to practice. And you know, in my experience in IEP meetings, it's been very much a team has been wanting to be like, okay, what can we change? And the focus, especially for kids with disabilities that are young, the focus should be on the system and the environment, and not just demanding that a child change their behavior when they're just maybe trying to make sense of where they're at in a lot of cases. So I think that if all of those kids have FBAs and BIPs, great, but there might be a lot of positive behavior strategies on the table that haven't been tried yet for those kids.
Thank you. That's a very good point. All good points. And I think that's, as we get into the data, I think we can have greater discussion, and that's going to probably help us, you know, in the long run, help us with policy, because you know, our policy is kind of a broad sense. You know, there are some that it's more interpretive depending on who you are and what training you've had, et cetera. And I think these are all good questions. And I know there's models out there I think I was sent, a board member sent me Durham County's policy on discipline. And we can look at other models too, which will be helpful to us as well. So, Dr. Smith?
All right, well, thank you. We do have a question in the chat about the functional behavior assessment. What I'll do is I'll defer to our EC staff. I'll share that with them tomorrow and then shoot out an answer to the group so that I don't misspeak on that particular topic. All right, the next item, and thank you for all your comments and your discussion. And I know we've got several requests for information, and we're definitely working on those. And I'll provide you just with a brief update near the end about where we are and what some of the shifts have been so that we can more readily provide the data that we're seeking to be able to answer the questions that we have. But what I wanted to do now is transition just a little bit and talk and share some information with you that from when I met with our subcommittee chairpersons. And so I'm trying to think the best way to do that. I think it's here. Let me go back and share my screen. There we go. And so thank you first and foremost for all of you identifying who your subcommittee chairpersons are. We met Friday just very briefly to have a conversation about how we can make sure that we're moving forward in our work. So I just very briefly want to talk about 4 types of goals. I did share this information with them, wanted to share it with you as well. And so those goals are purpose goals, phase goals, progress goals, and practice goals. In really the purpose goal, and so you can see at the bottom where it says we need a clear theory of action subject to validation. So we need to be able to articulate in our work in such a way that it's valid, so that if someone asks us why we're doing something or why we're approaching something in a specific way, we can provide them with the rationale or justification. And so focusing on our goals this way does help us to do that. So what we typically do or have done in the past is really focus on SMART goals. But if you think about it, when we talk about doing XYZ by XYZ date with certain level of proficiency, our SMART goals really motivating. They may help you monitor your progress, but are they motivating? Do they tell you or help you know what to do? And is a SMART goal really something that's doable? So if it's increased the representation of marginalized student populations in AP courses, does that tell you how to enroll or to increase numbers of students who historically are not enrolled in AP courses? Does it tell you how to do it? And does it always give you that information in a timely fashion? So we see the purpose of SMART goals, but really there's something that's missing when we just lean on SMART goals by themselves. And that's what we talk about purpose goals. And so a purpose goal is what we really, really want. And so the 6 goals that we as a committee have identified are really ultimately where we want to land. This is where we want to see our system. These goals assess our aspirations. So they're those big things. Sometimes they're really hard to articulate, but those are the big things that we're moving for. They're motivating. When you say to someone equitable practices, that's easily shared. People understand what you're talking about. They immediately have some, even a sense of emotion connected with that. And then, as we're all finding now, they transcend specific strategies and targets. And you can have multiple ways of getting there. So if we're talking about equitable practices, there's more than one way of achieving that. So that's the purpose goal. It's kind of like what keeps you up at night. Then there are the phase goals, and phase goals are what we'll eventually get to once we move beyond where we are now. So there is this iterative process. So it may be what we're able to accomplish in 1 year. It may be what we're able to accomplish in the first 90 days. It may be what we're able to accomplish in the first 6 months. So there are phases of the work. And here we ask ourselves the question, did we get done what we wanted to get done? And this helps us assess accomplishments and establish milestones. And then there are the progress goals. And what I'll say is progress goals look more like SMART goals than not. And it's really, did we get the results that we wanted? So did we enroll more children in our AP courses who historically have been unrepresented in those courses? And these goals really are about alignment. So we can align these with our strategic plan, with our outcomes associated with specific integrative assessments. We can align these with surveys that we do, that we conduct with students and with families. And these goals allow for analysis. And then finally, practice. Practice really is the day-to-day. Did we do what we intended to do? They really assess action. So it's about not just movement, but behavior. So here, if we, using that same example, are talking about enrolling students who historically have been underrepresented in AP courses, then our practice goals would be connected to things that would happen in elementary school, middle school, high school. They would be the things that we would either do daily, weekly, monthly, annually. They would really be about behavior. Sometimes they're called tactics. So we have our strategies and then we have our tactics. But these are the things that we do. And so where our conversation really centered with our committee chairpersons were really around the practice goals. I think that it's extremely important for us to have identified our strategies, but what is the behavior that we actually want to see? What is it that we want to have occur in our schools? So our practice goals should be directly doable and where we apply our effort. So the challenge to them was really about how do we continue to move ourselves forward around our overarching goals, which are our purpose goals, and get to the place of practice. And so what I'd like to do is just pause here and take any questions, definitely open for comments as well.
Speaking as a high school principal in a lot of different situations, at some point, and I like the use of the AP analogy, but we need to back up and also put in honors or accelerated classes in earlier. The sooner you can get into that arena, which prepares you for the AP and or additional classes. And so it is going to take some getting into the phase, if that's the right one to say, to prepare to the next phases. And so that's something we need to think about, that Al and I need to talk about. I'm sure Al's listening. I guess I'm not sure he's on there or not, but you just don't pop into an AP class, because we're using it as an analogy. Now there's some kids, but they're not many who could do that. And so it's a developmental stage. It's just like foreign language. You start with one unless you just happen to have them. And there are a few of those, not many. So just as we look at that, I had to say that because part of the goal is to implement introduction into the accelerated arena, because AP is the tip, and then of course IB. But as a rule, I would say the vast majority of those students, at least in my experiences, and I feel comfortable saying I'm sure it still is, started in an earlier age. and then progressed. And so I think that's all needs to be one of our initial focuses. If that makes sense.
Well, and thank you for that, Mr. McGinnis. I think you make a great point. And that's why practice goals are so necessary. So we can't just create a SMART goal that we're going to increase AP enrollment by X, Y, Z. We have to identify those behaviors that show up in elementary school, that show up in middle school, that show up early in high school, that allows us to achieve that overall progress goal of increasing our numbers in those AP courses. So I think you've made the point beautifully. But what happens often is we end up with that SMART goal, and then we don't know why we can't achieve it. And it's because we haven't thought, in my opinion, strategically about how this shows up, not just when a child gets in ninth grade, but how it shows up and where it sits and rests in elementary school and middle school as well. So thank you for that. I think you make a great point.
And I got to say one more thing, and then I'll hush. In that focusing arena, like summer school, of course, the legislature changed their mind about 7 or 8 times, so we'll see what ends up with. But the focus at the moment, one of the focuses is, of course, the math and the reading and science with the K-5 who are not being successful, who are behind. If the last thing I read, I think that's still current. Somewhere we need to implement something for those kids to help them. Accelerate's the wrong word, but in the preparedness to take these other classes. So I think at some point we need to speed up a few and try it. But the long-term goal is to make that a developmental and an automated process. But I just think that we also need to provide, many years ago, since I'm just a tad older than Stephanie, all summer school was for new classes. And I don't know why we still couldn't have some prep new classes for kids who are interested in taking an accelerated next level. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm sorry.
It does. And also your comment about, and I know you said that maybe acceleration is the wrong word, but actually the research shows that acceleration is actually the right word. Where we don't see success is in remediation. But where we do see success is when we accelerate students within an existing curriculum. Now, of course, it's really, really hard work because you have to be very intentional about how you build out those curriculums and the resources that you use and how you scaffold to the grade level standard. But what the research does show is that acceleration as opposed to remediation is how we close the achievement gap with our students.
Has anyone pulled, for instance, there'll be a new school year bulletin for classes. Has anyone pulled and looked at the academic requirements to go into certain classes? That'll give you a great idea. Well, actually give you actual what those expectations are, because you need to understand those expectations, deal with them as you may, but that's part of the real, this is what gets you there. And so that helps you build earlier to get there. That makes sense too? I mean.
So are you talking about the prerequisites for courses?
Yes, ma'am.
So we actually don't have prerequisites as they used to be in the past. We saw that very much as a way of restricting students. And so now students, it's much more open now. And so essentially the curriculum in and of itself is available to all of our students.
All right.
Hugh, that's definitely something that you can talk with the subcommittee on, because I know that's something that you want to really focus on. I know you're an action guy, and I think that would be a great place to start. Looking at that. Obviously, my strategy I'm working on is suspension rates, but it's definitely worthy to put your time into that with your subcommittee coming up, I would say. Okay. I think that was great, Dr. Smith. I mean, I know we got the subcommittee heads, chairs got that earlier on, and I think it makes total sense. You got to have your overarching idea, and then you got to work your way down to, the measuring of it and what you can achieve. So I think that really helped me a lot with my goal.
Wonderful, thank you. And again, if you have questions later, please don't hesitate to share them. The next thing that I had on the agenda was really just to provide an update in terms of the data requests. Right now, what I have pending, and if I've overlooked anyone, please correct me. We have a large data set that we're working on that involves all of our schools. But what we're going to do is we're going to chunk that, and we're going to emphasize and focus on district level data first. And so I've already started having some additional conversations with our folks around that. And to be honest, when I handed them the larger data requests, I think it was slightly overwhelming. And so folks were having, people work on it. But again, being able to provide all of that at one time before you released it or before you handed it back to us, I think would take a lot of time. But looking at chunking that and providing the district data first, I think is much, much more reasonable. So my hope is, and what I'll do is, I don't think it necessarily requires, and of course we can, but a presentation at each of our meetings. Sometimes it's just handing the committee the data set. So what we anticipate by end of week, hopefully, would be the discipline data. I think there was interest in the failure data. And then I think we've got one more other data set that we're working on. And then also the demographic data. And what we'll do is we'll make that available to everyone. Okay. And then the last thing that I have on the agenda before our closing, and I know we met last week. It does not escape me. I think for some reason we were off in our meeting schedule, just simply because things come up and this work is so important that we don't want to not meet. We ended up moving one of our meetings in February, and now we're back on track with the first and the third Monday in March. So it necessitated this meeting happening today, which I think was good because we didn't really get to finish our conversation last week about the discipline data that you had in front of you. And then also we ran out of time, and I did not get to share the presentation around the goals that I was able to share today. But what I'd like to do is create a little bit of time and space for any committee updates that you might have. And of course, if you don't have one, that's not a problem. That's not an issue. That's not a concern. We just met last week, but I did want to give time and space for any committee updates. And I'll bring that document up.
This isn't, Dr. Smith, this is Caress. This isn't really, well, I guess it kind of coincides with committee work, but I was just noticing on some of the committees how we have 4 or 5 people, and then others, we only have 2 people. So it's a lot of work to try to delve into with just so few people looking at everything. And then when we're talking about how the work group, how the EDI committee also works with the work group, and I was just wondering, is there any way that we could bring in work group members to work with us on these subcommittees?
So yes,
around that?
Yes, and we had some of that discussion with our chairpersons. And the short answer to that is it's very much so. So they're not members of the EDI because we have a process by which we nominate and decide on members, but they definitely can and should be working with you on the goals that we've identified for the EDI board level committee. The other thing that I shared with committee chairpersons, and it depends just on how you feel about it. We don't have to work on all 6 goals at the same time. I'll be very honest, most improvement plans will have 2 to 3 goals, not necessarily 6. So it may be that we prioritize the top 3 and then we, collapse ourselves. We can still be identified and associated with goals 4 and 5 or whatever they might end up being, but then the emphasis in the work and the focus becomes on only 3 of them. Because what I'll say is, and just looking at the goals on the screen and thinking about them, there's a lot of overlap. And so if we can get equitable treatment right, then that's going to take care of a lot of our concerns about equitable opportunity to learn and vice versa. I think they're different, but I think they're also very similar as well. So however folks want to move forward is definitely the option. So inviting others to be a part of this work, community, school-based, work group, non-work group members, or focusing on fewer goals in doing the work in more of a phased process. Excuse me.
Was it Lena that was, I think in our subcommittee, we were talking about that, because I think each goal, you can have probably a bunch of strategies underneath it. And I think it could get a little overwhelming. And you're right, maybe if we can hone it down on some main themes, just to start with, see how we do. I think collaborative approach is really good because, for example, when we were talking about equitable treatment last time, Tyler was making some good points, from a teacher point of view. So I feel like if we can help each other, or if we feel like there's some things that we could probably tackle first to see how we do, that might be good. I don't know how people feel about it, but there's a lot to tackle.
Yeah. And thank you for that. I think you make a great point that I'd forgotten about. That's the other thing. We've got the 6 goals, but if you've identified 15, 16 different strategies, there's no way that you're going to be able to implement all of them at the same time. So there's nothing wrong with having 15 strategies identified, but I really encourage you to focus on 2 or 3 strategies that are really going to make the difference. When I work with my team, what I talk to them about often is the one thing. If we can identify that one thing that if we do it really, really well, it makes all other things less necessary, then that's where you dig in. That's where you invest your time, your energy, and your efforts.
Anybody have any thoughts on that? Any of the subcommittee chairs?
I just wanted to bring to the attention of this group one discussion that I have with my partner, with Rachel, in the logistics. So we have time for really work on the goals and making the best out of the time we have here. If it would be a possibility, and Rachel and I thought of doing it, and maybe one of the meetings, the first meeting of the month, dedicated to updates and reporting, and the other meeting actually dedicated to the subcommittee work. So we have one of the scheduled meetings here to meet with the group members and work or designated some tasks. Either that option, or having half of the time dedicated to 1 or 2 committees presenting. So we rotate the presentation and the updates, and we truly have time to listen to the others and give some input and, bring some expertise from other areas. And we really have time to digest. I feel when we listen to the 6 groups talking, it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and we cannot say much. But today, when we talk about this retention data, we all participated, we all say things, and we brought our expertise from the different fields. And I think that was very enlightening and enriching to the discussion. So if we can have maybe half of the time to present and update, and half of the time to work on the subcommittees, or having one meeting dedicated to updates and the other meeting dedicated to work on the subcommittees, either in the same venue, having the link established and we go to break rooms, or we create our own links and we meet and then we report the other meeting. I don't know. It's just some logistics. I'm just trying to do the best use of my time. I'm feeling kind of overwhelmed lately.
So thank you for that, Lena. And if you remember, before that was our design, we were supposed to have one meeting that was just really about presenting and that type of thing, and one meeting really dedicated to the work groups. And what ended up happening was the agendas became so long and there was always so much to discuss. We never gave time to the committees really working. It's almost like, what is it that you end up cutting out? And that's the part that ended up getting cut out. And then the other thing about dedicating just one meeting for the subcommittees to work is, if we're now inviting work group members, if we're now engaging with the community, and outside of that, they're not going to necessarily be a part of this meeting. And so you would not be able to work with them. My hope would be that this work in and of itself happens outside of our meetings. But again, my role is only to help facilitate. And so I'm happy to do it whatever way the committee decides. So I don't know, Ms. Walker, if you have a preference?
I do not have a preference. I actually like the ideas of streamlining our discussion. I feel like I like the idea of being collaborative on these, because I feel like everybody brings something different and really good to the conversation. And it really does, it leads to like a broader, more robust discussion where we can know where next steps are. I mean, I'm up for suggestions as far as our meetings. Since we do have two, I think we could probably go back to the original way of, if you want to. I do agree, like having the public be able to kind of be in the conversation is good too. I just don't want anybody to get burned out or get overwhelmed. I think it would be best to, I guess, figure out what the consensus is. I know with other committees I'm on, they do send out maybe a form just to get ideas, but other than that, I mean, anybody that wants to speak up is free to let us know what you think.
I agree 100% with Lena on this. I think if we decided, okay, the first meeting of every month will be dedicated, we might say the first. I think, subcommittee work is important. So if we, jump in and we say from 5 to 5:15 is going to be welcome, agenda, whatever. And then from 5:15 to 6:15 is breakout Zoom subcommittees. And then we come back for a 15-minute closing. If we did something like that, I think that would be smart. I know Lena and everybody here, but, being a teacher, or working in a school, we don't have any flexibility with our schedule, and Lena gets it too. Like, I'll walk in the door at 6:45 and, go straight to 3 o'clock. So I, don't really have any time during the day to plan, for EDI, for the EDI subcommittee. So if I knew that we had that dedicated time to sit, like my mental faculty could all be committed to that in that hour. And I feel like we get a lot more done. Because I think, just trying to schedule something else out, for example, Fran, Sean, and Thad and I are all in the same subcommittee. If we try to coordinate all three of our schedules versus already having that dedicated twice a month and just really commit to that subcommittee work, I feel like we could get a lot more done. So yeah, I appreciate that suggestion from Lena, because I know right now between serving on the work group, some book studies, and what we're starting to see now is the ones that are involved on the EDI board are also involved on the equity teams at their school, which are 2 meetings a month right now, until we're done with that, which is going wonderfully. But then if you do that in the work group and EDI, you're looking at 5 to 6 meetings a month. And then trying to add something else in it becomes overwhelming, and we want to do it with fidelity.
Okay. So Dr. Smith, what would be the challenge with doing that suggested breakouts as far as, I guess, broadcasting the meetings? Would that be a challenge?
Well, so 2 folks have their hands raised.
Okay.
Sean's hand went up first. But to answer your question very quickly, I think what happens is you end up excluding anyone outside of this group. And so it's just really is, what is the preference? We surely can do it either way. But I know Sean's hand is up. I'm not sure who's other. Let me stop sharing so I can see. Sean and Kirsten. So Sean, if you want to go first.
Yeah, my only caution would be I completely agree with that from the perspective of teacher and administrator's time, because your time is so heavily scheduled throughout the day that it makes meeting difficult. But my only caution on that is that if we make all the decisions and do all the analysis in these meetings, which is what we've tried to do, the last year and a half, it becomes, it's very difficult to make and get consensus on all 20 people at the same time. So I think that even if we tried that, it would be very limiting to how fast we could go, and how, like, I've really enjoyed the momentum that we've had the last couple of weeks on an asynchronous schedule. And I think that's been able to be done, not even with group 2, for example. We haven't been able to meet in person just because of everybody's, like Lena said, everybody's schedule limitations. But we have been able to collaborate via email. So I worry about it slowing us down a little bit if we just defer all work to only the meeting. So that's my only caution, is that, like, we've tried that in the past, and it hasn't resulted in as much movement as I think everybody would like.
Well, that was kind of why I think like a compromise could be, one of the meetings is that work, or maybe even we reduce that time, maybe 45 minutes or so, and then come back together for kind of like a group catharsis. And then the other meeting maybe not be subcommittee work, where we have kind of like, because I really love what we had tonight, looking at suspension data and everything. I just know from a school personnel perspective, I would definitely think being able, if we could somehow find a compromise to include the subcommittee work within a meeting once a month, I do think we would get hopefully some more leeway.
I think Kirsten has her hand up next.
Sure.
And then Lena.
So I'll react to what I was just hearing immediately. And from an equity perspective, I'm hearing the educators say that this is really demanding on their time. And so from an equity perspective, we should think about what is a way to incorporate the educators' perspectives and work without overtaxing them, because we don't want to overtax them. So just an update from Subcommittee 1. Sean and I have been working on accessing data and liaising with Dr. Smith about getting some data. And I'm new. I'm going to speak to you from a new person's perspective, a new committee member's perspective. I walked away from our meeting last week with a very heavy heart, because it really moved me to learn that you don't have a research office. Yes, you have a testing and accountability office, but you don't have a research office in New Hanover County Schools. And Sean and I put together a set of spreadsheets in an effort to get a grounding in what's going on in the system. Could we see the system of equitable pathways to comparable high achievement across students, recognizing that achievement isn't something that we just produce in a year. It's these historic pathways that students are experiencing, and the earlier you get to equity, the better. I think I saw that in the chat, and I thought that was a great comment. And I walked away with a heavy heart, because I thought, how in the world can we reverse 400 years of systemic oppression and marginalization if we can't see the data that we requested in these spreadsheets? But I realize we are where we're at. And so as our subcommittee chairperson, I sent a letter to the Board of Education and to the superintendent, asking the Board of Education to consider their role in developing policy and creating a research office, so that the data that we're talking about, they're available, and not just available to a committee like this, available to every single educator, at least annually, if not multiple times throughout the year. So I want to mention that because Dr. Smith wisely said, sometimes there's one piece on the board that you can move. And if you move that piece on the board, lots of other things fall into place. And I really do believe that if our educators, if our administrators and committees like this, and the Board of Education especially, were reviewing the pathways to high achievement and reviewing them for racial equity, for economic equity, for language status equity, for gender equity, for special education status equity. If you were reviewing that regularly, we would be able to see the system and correct the inequities that are currently baked into the system, because I know that's what everybody wants here. So I just wanted to share that.
Okay, and I think Lena, you had your hand up.
Yes, and that was just to piggyback on what Tyler was saying, trying to find a compromise. I think if we select the one or two subcommittees that want to update every meeting, and we dedicate some time to work on the subcommittee, and I know the work is not going to get done only with one meeting, but we can at least like know what kind of data requests, or they delegate some assignments to the group members, something that starts the work that has to be done throughout the month. And if we know exactly when we are presenting and we are ready to share and receive the input of the committee, that is going to give us like almost a month or 2 months to present, and then give us the time to update and have more progress in our goals. If, for example, next Monday, the next time we meet, we have goal 1 and 2 presenting, then we know goal 3, 4, 5, and 6, they have to the next meeting to present. So they are going to have more time to see more progress on their different goals. And still, we're going to have time to have the input, the people that is with us, that is important to get the feedback from them, or maybe new ways to see it that the subcommittee didn't notice from the different experiences. Thank
you. Just hearing the feedback from folks, and I, read Ms. Siberry's comment in the chat. And again, if you haven't looked in the chat, please do. It's full of just wonderful feedback and interaction that we don't always reference, but I do value the feedback from everyone. What about the possibility of actually just eliminating one meeting a month? Because one other thing is, if we move into a breakout group, essentially for 45 minutes, then what you're going to get on the other side, if you're at home watching, is it's just going to be a static screen. So the folks at home won't have the benefit of the discussion, and especially if the breakout ends with just us closing and it's not a summation or anything like that, which of course would take a lot of time. But the possibility could be that we eliminate one of our meetings and then maybe elongate the other. So right now we meet for 90 minutes twice a month. But we surely could meet for maybe, instead of an hour and 30 minutes, an hour and 45. So that might be a possibility. And then what I'll say about presenting, very honestly, to me, it's not about different subcommittees presenting on their goals. It's really about giving them the time and place to share. And for me, really about asking a question. Sometimes, when I want to share, it's about being in the company of folks who I consider thought partners, who can take a look at my work, reflect on it, and ask a really good question that helps me drive forward. So I think the sharing really should be, you can update within the spreadsheet, which I think is great. And then everybody can see that and read that. But really the sharing is about space and time for you to present your work, to get feedback from thought partners that would help you elevate and move your work forward. So would that be a reasonable compromise?
I like the idea of cutting back on a meeting a month. I know when we first started and we had that discussion of how often we needed to meet and how many times we wanted to kind of get in front of each other, I had suggested bi-monthly, just as because we were just starting and getting to know each other and getting to know what the work we would be doing was, but it was never an intention that we would have to always meet twice a month. I had hoped that eventually we'd get to that point to where we were solid enough in our work to where we could cut that back to once a month. And then so I think moving to once a month and maybe even doing 2 hours would be sufficient for where we're going, where we are now, especially with the goals we have currently and that solid footing that I feel this group has. And I agree with Tyler as well, because I'm the EDI committee, I'm on the equity work group, and I'm doing the equity coaching as well. And through that equity coaching, I know that will lead to further equitable opportunities that I will be taking part in within the schools and the work of equity. So I think not just for the school level people, but the equity work we are doing, because it is so becoming so ingrained into our district now, I feel that moving to once a month would be sufficient.
Okay.
Can I add, Dr. Smith, that I'm new here too. So, I mean, relatively. And so I didn't know how the meetings were set up. And I know with other committees that I'm working on, subcommittee groups, you know, they're not necessarily broadcast. We just get together. And then when we're on the main meeting, we really kind of talk about what we've researched. So, I mean, I'm okay with that too. I feel like there's so many people that want to do such good work, like they're either already doing the work or are kind of really feeling the pressure of being able to be, you know, here in public on the screen for twice a month. It's probably would be a bit of a relief, I think. That's what I'm hearing anyway.
Can I ask a question? Because I'm hearing it's the equity work group, it's the EDI board committee, and then it's another group. So can someone differentiate each of the groups? Because this is a lot of overlap, seems like.
It took me a while too.
Going on, so, and I don't know, and I'm new, and so I'm just like, excuse me.
So I can share with you just a little bit of history. The equity work group began as an employee group. It started around the issue of equity, actually related to private school students being able to access higher level courses at Hoggard High School. And then from that work, it launched to looking at disparities that showed up in our district in many other ways. There was such traction around the work of the work group that the board at the time wanted to elevate the work of equity in the district to a board level committee. But they also valued the work of the work group, so they did not want them to disband. And so that's why we have the equity work group and then the equity, diversity, and inclusion board committee. And then the other group you're referring to, I'm not sure.
I think she's mentioned the coach that Caress said that she's part of, the equity coaches team.
Okay, so all of that is a part of the equity work group. So we're providing training to folks who want it, training and being equity coaches, and that's through the Equity Collaborative. And we're actually providing equity team training for 24 schools in our district that have established equity teams at their schools, and that's through Craig Meyer and the Equity Collaborative.
Okay, yeah, I think that's probably what it was. It was, I know when I first started, I had to figure out what the work group was and then what the committee was. And I mean, it's totally within our power to decide where our energy should go, I think, at this point. But I know I've been doing that on other committees too, because we're new board members and we're new people to the groups. And so we've all kind of said, well, let's reassess what we're doing and see whether this is how we want to do reporting, if we can streamline it, make it better for people's schedules, and if we'll get more, you know, work out of it. Because I'm hearing obviously that people very, very busy schedule, especially teachers are on so many things that they're not able to get the committee work done that they want to, you know, out of the committee meetings. So if we do cut down to one meeting, I guess then I think we're, as a subcommittee, is going to want to be able to make sure we meet with each other to do the work. And so when we come to the meetings, that we can decide what, you know, how we want to structure them. What are your thoughts, Dr. Smith?
So if we do decide, then what we could do is just meet the first Monday of every month, and then the subcommittees could still continue to meet on their own on the third Monday. So that would not be a scheduled meeting. It would not be facilitated or organized by you or by me or by my office. But then the expectation would be that at least once a month that subcommittees were meeting to do this work.
Okay.
I agree to all that. I think that's great. I would ask, is it possible, since we're just so used to meeting under this platform, would it be possible for us to still meet in Zoom on that third Wednesday, facilitated, not necessarily facilitated by you, Dr. Smith, but just as a matter of opening up Zoom, say welcome for 5 minutes, and then boom, send us into breakout rooms? Would it be okay to do that, you think?
If we did that, then that would be an EDI committee meeting, and we would have to tell.
Okay. I did not realize that. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think part of the issue with that is we wouldn't be able to bring in the equity work group at all for support, like we were kicking around, and also I'm on 2 committees, and I kind of don't want to give either of them up, because one committee is focused on you know, kind of advanced placement outcomes, that sort of thing, and then the other committee is focused on like inclusion. And so you know, I would get kicked out of one of them for all intents and purposes.
Okay. Out of ours because you're the only other member of it.
Yeah, right. I do think it could give us the space back. Like if Tyler and Lena, you know, that applied time and space, I think it could give us some space back that has been in the last few weeks, at least from my observation, highly effective. I just want to make sure, Kamika, you mentioned you needed more time to process information. Would that make you feel like that time is taken away, or that time is given back to you?
Like, I don't need to be on a time frame during a room to process and have a discussion about what needs to be done.
Got it. Okay.
That's not logical for me. It's not. I don't know about anybody else. And I am a teacher also. I work in classroom. I am working as you know, administrative intern. I'm doing all of those things, but I have to, and I apologize to anybody who ever has to work with me, but you know, through some kind of means outside of a meeting group like this, like it's too much. Like but to take the time to have a discussion, to understand, and then to receive feedback, and not necessarily be on a time limit to where it is cut off. It's great work that needs to be done that can't be done in an hour once a month. And so that was just where I was saying with all of that. Like, I don't think that we really want to have equitable practices. When are we going to have some action behind what we're trying to do? And yes, the initial group did a lot of work, and I appreciate everything that I'm seeing. But if some of the same discussions are going on, I just feel like it's gonna take more work in the beginning, and then that's when you ease up. But I mean, I'm new, so I don't know.
So if I could kind of bring the discussion to a point. So what I would say is, I think I hear folks saying that there's definitely been value in how we've done things over the last couple of months. But we also, and Kirsten, thank you for articulating this so beautifully, you know, we've got some folks who are saying to us that the pace is not something that they really can sustain. So I think just having had the opportunity on Friday to meet with the subcommittee chairpersons, if I kind of reach out and challenge you guys now to maintain the momentum then I think we probably could successfully transition to one meeting a month. And then maybe evaluate that over a 2 or 3 month period. And then if we find that that's not working, then we could always increase or move back to having 2 meetings a month, or having that second meeting be a little more structured than what's happening. So at this time, I'd love to make a motion per se, that we transition to one meeting per month, and then that second meeting be one that is led by our subcommittee chairpersons, where you engage your folks in the work of your subcommittee.
Second.
All right. So Miss Walker, you are the chairperson, so I guess you could take a vote on that.
You want me to, since I don't know exactly everyone's on here, but do you want me to, is this a procedural thing we're trying to do here?
I think we're a little less than formal.
Okay, I'm just making sure.
But again, I think we probably could debate this one probably to after 7.
Probably.
Probably don't want to. But so yes.
How do you want us to vote? With a hand up, with on the chat? How do you want us to say we either like it or not?
My suggestion would be to put a 1 in the chat if you agree, a 2 in the chat if you don't. Does that work for you, Ms. Walker?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely.
And one other thought, Dr. Smith, I don't know if this complements, I have really appreciated looking at the data, but I spend my days looking at data, right? And so if you're doing the thing that you're always doing, you can do it pretty quickly. But there are things that we could do as a group, some sense-making activities, some breakouts where 2 people look at the data together and see the patterns together, where it becomes a more equitable process for everybody to dig into the data that we're looking at and generate some insights that they share with the group. And so if that's interesting to the group, I'd be happy to support that work or help someone else support that work, just so that we can really make a space where everybody's expertise and insight comes to bear.
And thank you for that. And I agree. I think we should definitely lean on the skills and expertise that everyone brings to the group, because we're all very, very different, and we were all very intentionally selected for our roles. All right, thank you. So I think we will be moving to 1 meeting a month. You'll see cancellations on your calendars. And then we will reassess and evaluate in about a 3-month period. So at this time, we are very near our closing. So I'd open it up to Mr. McManus if he would like to close us out.
Well, just thank you, and all those who joined. I think Al probably didn't make the meeting, so I'll call Al and talk to him. And if I don't think it would prohibit anybody from sending any information or any type of, like you said, a chart. Say, by the way, just wanted to share this with you. I mean, I don't think we want to prohibit that just for 1 meeting. That makes sense.
I was going to say, it is down now to us now that we have 1 meeting to meet in our subcommittee groups, but at least it's time for us to be able to do it when our schedules are probably better to permit it. And you're right, you getting the data is going to be no different is if we contact Dr. Smith and say this is what we need, and then as we go forward we can see whether this is working or not, or if there's a different way we can do it. So this isn't set in stone. Let's go to 1. Let's see how we do, and if we feel like we want to come back, then we can do it. We're free to do that. So
yep,
it was kind of unanimous, I believe.
Yeah, it was.
Just don't be surprised if I email everybody.
That's okay. That's okay.
Please.
I'm okay with that.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you.
Let me know if I can be of any assistance.
So we'll see you tomorrow night for the marathon.
Yes.
Enjoy.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Good luck, everybody.
Thank you.